Welcome you to the Joint Development Control Committee meeting taking place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 15th of February 2023. Other members of the committee are, if you could just acknowledge who you want yourself and I sing out your name. Councillor Pora. Councillor Thornborough. Councillor Bradman.
Councillor Bradman from, Anna Bradman from South Cambs District Council. Thank you.
Yes. Present.
Present Chair.
And present Chair.
It's on, should be on, right. Thank you very much. Councillor Brown's always very good at helping me with that. Councillor Richard Williams and Councillor Gawthorpe Wood are online. And Councillor Carling is going to arrive soon. Okay. So no apologies received other than the ones from Councillor Flaybert. Officers permanently at the table for this meeting are Strategic Sites Delivery Manager Philippa Kelly. Hello. Legal advisor to my right is Keith Barber. Committee Manager Chris Connor. And Producer James Goddard. Please can those present in the council chamber note that everything on your desk, including your laptop screen, may be broadcast at some point. The camera follows the microphone being switched on, so councillors and officers are requested to wait a couple of seconds before speaking to allow the camera to catch up. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak. Please can those participating in the meeting via Teams indicate that you wish to speak via the chat column or raised hand option. Please do not use the chat column for any other purpose. The meeting chat is neither confidential nor private and can be subject to an FOI GDPR request. Make sure your device is fully charged and that you switch your microphone off unless you've been invited to speak. Please can meeting participants keep their microphone and cameras turned off until we come to the developer briefing you will be speaking at. Though no planning application is being presented at committee today, the process for each pre-application developer briefing will be as follows. The developer team will present the proposals in a presentation of no more than 20 minutes. At the end of the developer presentation, there will be up to 40 minutes for members to ask questions about the scheme as presented. Now, before we proceed, can I just remind members of the committee that there is a Section 106 training session to be held at 10 o'clock Thursday, February the 23rd at South Cambs Hall or online. It'll run from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock. So please put that date in your diaries and attend if possible. It's an important session for us all to be at. So thank you for that. So I'll just move on then to agenda item 2. This is the pre-application developer briefing, land north of Newmarket Road, the final stage development of Marley. The creation of new homes, commercial units, public open space, landscaping, and associated works. And the developer now introduce themselves and their colleagues assisting with the presentation, and I will invite councillors to ask questions once the presentation has finished. Thank you.
Right hand button.
Yeah.
Oh. Brilliant. Okay. Try again. Morning, everyone. My name's Henry James. I'm a Senior Development Manager at Hill Residential, representing the applicant, Hill Marshall.
Good morning, my name is Fraser Aitchison. I'm the architect at JTP.
Morning, everybody. My name is Will Cobley from Terence O'Rourke, and I'm a planning consultant advising on the scheme.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. We've got a presentation to go through for you. So today we're presenting Marley Phase 3, which is the third and final phase of the Marley scheme. This is just a rough agenda of what we're going to go through. So we're going to give a brief overview of the planning context and give a site introduction, talk about the phasing and uplift, then go through what the site looks like today, a brief overview of the design code and the parameter plans, and then we're going to get into the key themes of Phase 3, talk about the emerging master plan, and then briefly go over the affordable housing contribution, road adoption strategy, SUDS, and sustainability.
Can I just ask all of the presenters to be mindful there's an echo in this room? So if you could slow down a little bit, that would be easier to hear. Thank you very much.
Sorry, apologies. So Marley is located on the east side of Cambridge, as I'm sure you're all aware, just north of Cambridge Airport. The nearest station is Cambridge North, which is about a 15-minute walk away from the site. You can see the entire Marley site is outlined in blue on the image, and then Phase 3 is outlined in red. If we zoom in then, you can see what that looks like in a bit more detail. As mentioned, Newmarket Road, which is one of the main routes into Cambridge, is on the southern side of the site. And then we have an existing neighbourhood called the Vising Estate to the western side. And then we have the Newmarket Road bus park and ride on the eastern side. You can see again that the blue line indicates the entire area of Marley, and the red line is indicating Phase 3, which is the final phase to be delivered as part of the development. And then just to give an overview of kind of where the phases are, so you can see Phase 1 and 2, which have already received planning approval, are located on the north and eastern sides of Phase 3. And then again, just indicate that the blue line is the entire area for Marley. So I think just to give a brief overview of the previous applications that's come forward, originally there was an outline application for a total of 1,300 new homes. Phase 1 was then delivered in two phases, with Phase 1A, which delivered 239 homes, Phase 1B, which delivered 308 homes, and then Phase 2, which delivered 421 homes. From that, you can then see there'll be 332 homes left as part of to fulfill the outline application. It's our intention, as part of the Phase 3 application, we will be submitting a Phase 3B application in tandem, which will contain an uplift of homes. I think it's important to note that we aren't proposing a higher density within Phase 3, and that as Marley is developed over the previous phases, the density has increased within those phases above what was initially outlined in the design code and outline application. Right now, we're not showing a divide line between the two phases, as we're not sure where that is at the moment. We will be delivering them both as a consistent design, and once the kind of final fixed master plan is sort of been finalised in more detail, we'll have a bigger idea of what the kind of final numbers of the uplift homes, which is why in the schedule we're not showing a final number yet for uplift, because we're not sure what. So just looking at what the site is today, this is a sort of an aerial image which is about a year old at the moment. You can see Phase 3 that's outlined in red. You can see that currently it's used as a car dealership. The ambition is, or the plan is, that the car dealership will be consolidated into the southwestern side of the site, which will then activate the site of Phase 3 for development. You can see on the western side the existing Vising Estate, and as part of Phase 3, we're proposing a new connection, which you can see indicated with the orange arrow there, which will allow the residents to get better access into the facilities that are coming forward as part of Marley. You can see on the eastern side is the existing park and ride bus station. And then within Phase 1, you can see the new mixed-use centre, which is called Jubilee Square, which has been delivered, which contains a community centre, new primary school, and a few mixed-use stores. Phase 1 and Phase 2 are currently under construction, and I believe there's some residents have occupied in Phase 1 currently as well. Here are just some images of kind of how Marley is starting to emerge. This is showing Phase 1. and you can see Gregory Park that's running through the middle, and then phase 3 to the northern part of the site, which currently is still occupied by the car dealership. You can see in the distance there is the new mixed-use centre, Jubilee Square, and the park and ride and the airport in the distance. And then just going through, you can sort of see the emerging character that's come from Marley. And an important part of phase 3 is to consider what has come before us in phase 1 and 2. So it's definitely something we've got to take into consideration. This is one of the key landscape features within Marley. It's called Gregory Park. It's an east-west SUDGE feature, which links through the entire site, which was delivered as part of phase 1. And it contains with it a new cycle route, which connects the existing park and ride all the way into Cambridge Town Centre. This is Marley Avenue, which is one of the key routes into Marley that connects Newmarket Road to the Jubilee Mixed-Use Square, and that will loop round and connect into phase 3 into a street that's called Austin Road, and will be the primary loop road that runs through Marley. So phase 3 will be the sort of the completion point of the main route through Marley. And here's just a few more images that you can see of sort of the emerging buildings. That's the community centre in the top left-hand corner in Jubilee Square, and some of the other homes that have come forward. Currently, the majority of the buildings that have been constructed are houses, and the higher density apartments are just underway from phase 2. So just a brief overview, there was a design code that was submitted as part of the parameter plans that details kind of a lot of the key aspects of the characters and coding for how the 3 phases should be delivered. Kind of one of the key things about that was the inclusion of character areas. So the wider Marley master plan is divided into 3 character areas called the city, the town, and the edge. And I'll come on to that in a bit more detail when we start to talk about how we've looked at phase 3. And then just to touch on the outline application did include parameter plans, which details the location of uses, the location of main routes, building heights, and also the key green infrastructure. So now coming on to phase 3 and the key themes that have evolved from that. Obviously, we've had 2 key events that have happened probably since or during when phase 2 was going through the planning process, which was the pandemic and the climate emergency. Now, both these events occurred after the outline application was submitted and the design code, so they don't form part of sort of the ethos of Marley. But as Marley starts to develop, we're keen for phase 3 to incorporate some of the lessons learned from these events. It's really changed the way we live at our homes and how we design homes, and we really want to incorporate that into the ethos of Marley phase 3. So as part of this, we've come up with these central 3 themes, which is live, work, and play. And from that, we have a series of principles that we think will help us achieve these 3 themes that relate back to the previous events. So the first one is living comfortably, and this is about maximising dual aspect homes. The second one is about active streets, creating a safe environment that's well overlooked. The third one is mixing things up, so it's about creating a variety of homes with a variety of tenures, a truly diverse community. The next one is about meeting neighbours, and it's about creating areas within the street for opportunities for social and play, talking about play on the street and reducing the amount of car dominance. New ways of working, we want to make sure that every home has a suitable area that you could work from home if needed. The cycle strategy is very important in Marley. We really want to discourage the use of cars and promote the use of cycling, and that as well entails connecting into the wider cycle network of Cambridge. And also healthy mind and bodies. We want to promote a healthy lifestyle within Marley. And the final one is finding a place to escape. So it's about ensuring that every home has access to high quality and a variety of public community spaces. Just want to touch on that we are looking for Building for Healthy Life accreditation. So there's 12 principles within this accreditation that we think aligns quite nicely with the Marley principles, and we're working with David Burbank, who is the author of this of Building for Life, and this is something that we'll be reviewing as the master plan evolves further. So I think at this point it's just key to note that we are still in a fairly early design stage for Marley. We've been working with Cambridge city planners to sort of develop the master plan, and we're at a stage now where we think we've got the key principles sort of fixed, and we're about to go into the more detailed elements of the master plan. So today is really just about communicating these sort of key principles to you and getting your initial feedback before we then start to develop the master plan further. So as I mentioned, Marley is divided into 3 character areas: the city, the town, and the edge. The city is located to the south, just north of Newmarket Road, and it's a higher density character zone, which mostly consists of apartments. The key spaces within this is Jubilee Square, which is a new mixed-use square, which has been delivered as part of phase 1, and Beta Square, which we now call Beta Park, which has been delivered as part of phase 3. The second area is the town, which is a sort of medium density, predominantly houses located in the centre of Marley. And again, that forms part of phase 3 with a few new key spaces being delivered within that, including the Stoop, the Western Edge, and the Titch, which was delivered as within phase 2. You notice the edge character area doesn't fall within phase 3, so we won't be discussing that in too much detail, although we do border it on the Gregory Park edge. So going on from there, we then wanted to create a sort of series of hierarchies when it came to routes. I've already mentioned Austin Street, which is the thick black line that runs north and south and sort of dissects phase 3. This was already specified as part of the outline, so that was a fixed parameter. And you can see how it links onto Marley Avenue and connects and becomes the main loop through into Marley. From then, we've then created a series of secondary routes which link key elements like the existing Fising estate to Gregory Park and then to the existing Jubilee Square, which was formed as part of phase 1. Finally, within these parcels, we wanted to create a sort of third tier of streets, which we're calling the lanes. And these are more dedicated towards reducing traffic movement and giving priority over to pedestrians. You know, a place where children can play on the street, where there can be social interaction. So it's not just about a connection route, it's about a space in themselves. And then I've touched on some of the key spaces already, but it's just to highlight these are already existing spaces that have come through as part of the outline that are focused around phase 3. I'll touch on Beta Park in a little while longer. The Fens, which was a new green landscape space that was formed as part of phase 2. And Jubilee Square, which I mentioned before, the mixed-use square. Gregory Park, which is the east-west park that borders the north of phase 3. Kingsley Woods, which runs around the north, east and south of Marley. And then this new space that we've kind of termed the community garden, which I'll get into in a bit more detail. So this is the emerging master plan as it currently stands. As I mentioned before, it's still quite high level because it's just about agreeing the main principles before we get into the detail. But I'll kind of go through the key elements of it now. I mentioned Austin Street, which is the primary route which runs north-south and dissects the site. And then moving from the southern edge of Newmarket Road, firstly we come into the city area, which is the higher density element of Marley. This consists of 2 apartment blocks which respond to the context. So the apartment block on the right-hand side, the eastern side, is a podium block with undercroft parking, typical of the blocks that came forward within phase 2. The apartment block on the western side, however, we're proposing will be deck access with surface parking. And this is mainly due to the context of where it sits. The western side of phase 3 with the car dealership is probably the most sensitive part of Marley, and we want to ensure that residents living within this eastern apartment block didn't have a single aspect overlooking that area, hence the reason to include deck access, which really promotes dual aspect homes. We're also keen to reduce the amount of parking, which is why we don't want to build podium decks around all the apartments. Podium decks don't bring much flexibility in case the trend changes in the future for parking. And there's also a lot of embodied carbon with the amount of construction that's required to build them. And then moving slightly north, we have this street here, which we're calling the Social Street. Again, it's a shared surface street that doesn't allow free movement of traffic. It's the kind of street where we think children will learn to play their bikes and people will socialise and sort of interact and spill out onto the street. The northern space then is Beta Park, which is a key kind of green space that's been brought forward as part of phase 3. Located to the north and south of Beta Park, we're proposing townhouses and apartments to the east and the west. The apartment building on the western side is called the Austin Block, which is a focal building, which will have commercial uses on the ground floor, which will spill out into the park. The park itself will be landscape will be quite naturally led. It will have a range of uses, including suds features, play equipment, and other ways for people to kind of social interaction. Kind of one of the key moves then that we've made from the outline application is this green route that runs north-south from Beta Park. In the original outline application, this was allocated as a vehicle road. We've managed to design that out to now be a green space which links Beta Park, and we see it as an extension drawing it down onto Newmarket Road, giving Beta Park a present on Newmarket Road for people that are driving past or walking past will be able to see and be drawn up into the site. Another key change is the roads that run to the north of south of Beta Park, that are east and west. Again, these were allocated as vehicle roads within the outline application, which we've now been able to design out as pedestrian and emergency vehicle only. So now looking at Bia Park, you can see on 3 sides it's now surrounded by pedestrian-only routes, which we think is really going to help activate the space and create a strong connection with nature. Oh. You know what, I'll refer to the letters instead then. If that's easier. Can you see the little letters on the screen? For that. So can you see the cursor now? Yeah, so the letter A is Bia Park, what I was referring to, and the letter D was the Austin building, which is the focal building which sits within the park. The letter C is this new north-south route, which previously was allocated as a vehicle route, is now a sort of extension of Bia Park, which runs to the south. And just to summarise quickly, the apartment block, this deck access is letter G, and the podium one was letter F. The townhouses that I mentioned to the north and south are letter E. And then moving into the town character area of phase 3, the first key space to note is letter H, which is the stoop. This is a sort of informal green space which pulls the woodland edge into phase 3, and then there's a connection on this east-south road which has extra wide vergage, which then connected to the Titch, which was a green space that was brought forward as part of phase 2. So this idea of creating an overarching green network that links everything together. Apologies. The other key space, which we've now called the community gardens, is letter I, which is located on the western edge. Originally in the outlined application, it was defined that there should be tennis courts and allotments in this location, but as the master plan has developed, we felt that wasn't quite right for the site. One, just because the actual size required for these uses, there wasn't enough size in this location. And secondly, we didn't think it was quite right for the residents that were living in this location to sort of have that as their outlook. So we proposed that the tennis courts will be reallocated to the eastern side of Marley in the playing fields, which was a new sports facilities which were delivered as part of phase 1. And then rather than an allotment, we proposed a community garden, which is a more informal version of an allotment, which will offer sort of informal play and opportunities for social interaction. And you can see at the bottom south-west corner is this new connection to the Fison estate. So this existing community to the west will also be able to benefit now have better access to the uses within Marley. And probably the final thing to note then is the letter K, which is these sort of cream colour streets you see within the parcels. These are the play streets that we were talking about in the Muse streets, predominantly shared surface with no through route for traffic. So it's very pedestrian priority and really on allowing children to play in the street and downgrading the use of the car. Nearly there. So a quick overview of the affordable housing contribution. So you can see here we're showing the overview of Marley as a whole. We're delivering a range of private, shared ownership and affordable rent homes that include 1 and 2 bed apartments and 2 to 5 bed houses. Just an overview for phase 3A, which will be fulfill the outline application of 332 units. They will deliver 30% affordable. And for the uplift, any homes that are delivered as part of the uplift application will be 40% tenure split. And then quickly on road adoption, we've tried to maximise the amount of adopted roads as possible to reduce the service charge, particularly in areas where we are proposing affordable rent homes. So you can see the purple indicates adoptable roads and the orange indicates non-adopted. The non-adopted roads are usually due to the issues we've had complying with the sort of Cambridge road standards and without the character that we want to achieve in these areas. We'll touch on SUD strategy too much, but the SUD strategy is a Marley-wide strategy, and the idea is it will be integrated into the landscape strategy. So the use of attenuation ponds and swales and will be features that will integrate within. And then just to touch on sustainability, it's still early to get into the detail of some of these aspects, but we do have some high aspirations, which include high quality and long-lasting construction, the development of a brownfield site, the proposal of a mix of tenures to create an integrated community, new pedestrian connections to the existing neighbourhoods, that includes the Fising estate that's to the west, the creation of new open green spaces, and with that biodiversity improvements with a new green network across the site. Air source heat pump heating strategy for apartments and homes, maximising dual aspect units, 100% Sheffield cycle stands, reduced parking provision to encourage the use of sustainable transport, a sustainable shed strategy, and EV electric charging for residents' car parking. So these are just a couple of images. This was the stoop, which is located in the town, which pulls in the woodland edge into the centre of Marley. And then this is that new north-south route that was allocated as a vehicle route within the city that runs down from Beta Park to Newmarket Road, which we've now been able to design as a new green line. Final slide is then just touching on the timeline. We've had various workshops with Cambridge City Council up until the members' briefing today, and I would say we're probably about halfway through the design process with aiming for a submission date around May or June this year.
Thank you very much. Your timekeeping was excellent. Thank you. So members are now encouraged to ask questions, seek clarification on the developer's presentation. Hang on. And we've got 40 minutes, so you will get a chance. Sorry, it was. You may need to refer to it. Yeah. Okay. You will. So I'd start again. Members are encouraged to ask questions, seek clarification on the developer's presentation, and are reminded not to express any opinions on the presentation proposals, so suggest or imply a closed mind. So suggested topics for discussion are principal development, scale, massing and height, design layout, sustainability, housing type and tenure, blue-green infrastructure, transport and traffic. Now, I noticed some members wanted to ask some questions. Councillor Fain, Bradman, Dobart, Hawkins, Ora. It's basically it's everybody, right? Levine, Thornborough, Harling. Yeah, I've got you, yeah. Councillor Khan. You're holding, should I just put you down last? Sorry. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll go in order. Councillor Fain, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for that presentation. I was interested particularly in this is on sustainability, on the three central themes you've developed in response to both the pandemic and the climate emergency, and also your final slide relating to sustainability. I was surprised that the three central themes didn't include any reference to either energy efficiency or locally generated renewables. I saw from one of your photos that it looks as though about 1 in 5 houses have, for instance, solar panels, and you referred under sustainability to the ASHP strategy. Specifically on that last one, I wondered whether the strategy means provision of air source heat pumps from the start, or making provision for subsequent fitting of air source heat pumps. Similarly with the solar panels, I wonder whether those are some sort of an option for buyers or whether those are fitted as standard, and what the energy efficiency in terms of the structure and the mass would be.
Yeah, did you want to take questions and answers or bundled together?
So firstly, thank you for your question. So yes, in terms of the energy strategy for phase 3, what we're proposing is air source heat pumps to all properties and provision of PV panels as well. That follows the strategy actually we set out at the phase 2 application, which was determined, I think, back in around October time of 2021. We're obviously conscious that the game moves on in a short space of time and picking up on the climate emergency points. So at the moment, we're just forming together a bit more detail around what our aspirations are for Marley Phase 3 and going above and beyond actually where the Part L building regulations have taken us. And you may be aware that actually at Marley, as part of the outline planning permission, we have a requirement here for an exemplar energy strategy. So in previous phases, we've dealt with that via looking at pilots of particular homes to introduce some sustainable measures and monitor them. Or also, for instance, as phase 2, the approach to exemplar in that case was actually to go ahead of the curve in terms of getting rid of gas, going to all air source heat pump and doing that site-wide in terms of fulfilling that exemplar requirement. So by the time you next hear from us, we'll be in a position, as part of the submission of our application to detail, in essence, what every home is going to receive here in terms of energy and sustainability measures and how we'll also deal with that exemplar requirement.
Very much. Can I just note, Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood, that you will be asked, noted that you want to ask a question. So, Councillor Badman, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions, but I'll keep them brief. The first one is, can you just clarify the uplift? Because if 1,300 houses were approved at outline, could you just describe to us what is the principle that are you planning to go over 1,300, or is it that your current density or the originally planned density would not achieve 1,300, so now you're planning to increase the density? If you could just explain that, that would be helpful. And if you're going over the approved outline number, perhaps you could justify that, or hoping to. The second question is, if you're planning to make the density greater in this phase 3A and 3B, could you confirm the amount of green space that you're enabling for play? The third one is, I wrote the question down, please can you make as many roads as possible to adoptable standards, this to reduce the costs for residents. And then later on you produced a slide in which you did clarify that some of the main spine routes nearest the adoptable homes did appear to be to adoptable standards, but I'd just like if you could perhaps go through that. And the final note, the apartment building on the west of Beta Park, if that is to be a combination of apartments and public buildings, please could you explain how you intend to manage the division of responsibilities for that building ongoing? That would be helpful to know. And also I noticed that the clustering, there seemed to be quite a lot of clustering of the affordable rent accommodation in the southwest corner, and I wondered whether you had considered scattering that more into the rest of the development. Thank you. That was actually about 5 questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's best if you take those. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for your question. If I deal firstly just with the uplift. So at the moment, in terms of this design where we've got to, we're talking approximately around 100 homes above the outline. So that would take Marley to 1,400. That number is sort of constantly in flux, is fair to say, working with officers. I think when we sort of started out the process about 4 or 5 months ago, I'll be honest, we were probably a couple of hundred above the outline, sorry. But sort of working with officers and getting into the detail, as things stands, the total number of units is around 430. But I will just sort of caveat that that number, as I say, is subject to change. So we're not quite sure yet in terms of where that number will be when we get to a submission. But I would be surprised if if it's anything beyond the ranges I've just talked about there. In terms of the sort of justification for the uplift, This is a design-led approach, so looking at the red line as a blank piece of paper, looking at the design code, looking at the parameter plans, and bringing a design forward, we feel that this number is achievable to still meet, the requirements of what the outline set. If anything, having had a look at this recently, the densities proposed in the different character areas on phase 3, as you see today, is actually slightly under the densities determined by this committee on phase 2, sort of about a year and a half ago. And I think really the explanation for that is we've in the response to obviously things like the pandemic and the climate emergency, we've put a focus on homes having more amenity space, and also we've sought to significantly increase our dual aspect provision on the apartments. And what that has done is there's been a slight reduction in density, therefore, to achieve those principles. I think also just to sort of finish on the uplift point, I think what we're talking about here as well with Marley Phase 3, it's a brownfield site. So providing, in terms of we're meeting the requirements and the aspirations of the design code and the parameter plans, we feel this is a sensible site to seek to go above and beyond the outline for delivering more homes. In terms of green spaces, yes, so linked to the uplift, we're not, achieving the uplift isn't at the expense of providing green space. And if anything, when you start providing more homes, there are requirements to provide more green spaces to meet the requirements such as play and open space. So we've been reviewing that, working with officers. We will be delivering the necessary requirements of open space and play space on site. Marley actually, as part of the outline, had a significant over-provision of green space in certain areas. So we've already got the benefit of that, but we'll be looking to obviously ensure that any additional provision that is required is delivered. Roads, yes, I think the slide on the screen tells the picture here. We've been picking up and kind of listening into members' discussions on previous schemes recently, such as Land North for Cherry Hinton. We could get the sense that this is a really key point, and rightly so, because it ultimately drives down service charges across the development. So we think, as a starting point here, we've made a really strong sort of proposal in terms of the amount of adoption. If I'm honest, I'd like this to be more if we can, as Fraser in his presentation alluded to earlier. The sticking points actually start to come around the requirements of Cambridgeshire County Council, Cambridgeshire Highways. So if I gave you an example on the screen towards the top right, where we've got the sort of east to west orange routes, that half of that came approved as part of the phase 2 reserve matters application. We've designed that to adopt to a standard. The issue we've now hit in continuing the parcel is that highways are saying because it serves more than 12 dwellings, they won't adopt it. We would welcome those roads to be adopted, but we're sort of feeling like it's slightly out of our control, speaking with highways on that point. That may be consistent with other schemes you've seen who've run into a similar issue. I think on the Austin block, I may just need to clarify your question. Was the question around how in practice the relationship between the residential and non-residential spaces would function?
I hesitated partway through because I realised it's probably outside the build, but thinking about the situation we've had at Trumpington, where there is a community building there that was originally built as a library and community buildings with apartments on top. We have had a number of problems with things like maintenance of the boiler, maintenance of the heating system, general commissioning of the building, and who is responsible for that ongoing, which has proved to be quite complicated. And so I just wondered if, for example, you were planning to manage that building as a whole, or hand it on to somebody who would manage it as a whole, and then deliver the community space, the library, whatever it is in the building, but also maintain it for the apartment blocks. That would be, I don't know if that's a way of doing it, but I just think we need to be, as planners, it's a great idea, putting apartments on top of community, but we need to be clear how the responsibility for that is handled.
Yeah, so in terms of the building we're talking about on phase 3, the proposals, at least for now, in terms of the non-residential element, is some form of commercial, whether that may be a restaurant. That ultimately is going to be market-led. And then above that, we're proposing residential. So yeah, in terms of the strategy of how we design that building, it'll be designed in a way to, for the independent users to operate independently, looking at how we service the building, heat the building. We also, as per other blocks on Marley, have a block management company that is set up, who essentially then take on the responsibility of running and looking after and maintaining the building as well. So if I gave you an example, for instance, on phase 1, where the Jubilee Square is, you'll note there's a few apartment blocks there which are now occupied, which is being managed by a block management company. Yeah, on the clustering, I think that was the question. Yeah, so we've had a couple of meetings to date with the housing officer to discuss the emerging proposals. This is not only in terms of location of the affordable, but actually the mix as well between the tenures. And actually, one of the points that came out of early discussions on this was the need and the desire to see more affordable rent homes proposed on Marley. So we've listened to that feedback, and what we've brought forward here is prioritising some houses for affordable rent, 2 beds and actually 3 beds. I think at the moment we've got more 3 beds than 2 because that's the need we're being told. In terms of the point you referred to in the southwest corner, there's a couple of kind of reasons really why we've come forward with this proposal. Firstly, and just in terms of the mix, this generally relates well to that parcel in terms of how we've designed it with the provision of some small-scale apartments, 2 and 3 bed housing. The second point we've looked at here, which I think is really important, is if you were living in that parcel, what would your proximity be to green spaces and play and elements like that? And we think this is a really strong parcel that's got connections to the west, immediately on its doorstep to what is proposed as a community garden. Just slightly to the north, there's a stoop area, which is another area of green space. And then also just to the bottom right of that parcel, there's the biggest area of green space that Phase 3 is delivering in Beta Park. Furthermore, just looking beyond Marley and how that links into the wider connections, heading east from that area, there's a fairly sort of strong route that runs towards Jubilee Square and the Marley Primary Academy. And then beyond that, sort of speaking with the housing officer, there is a balance here in terms of, fully appreciate that there are a lot of homes located together, but from a management and maintenance perspective, when we speak with registered providers, there often is a desire for this. I do appreciate the comments back can be a concern around sort of tenure blindness. The important thing to stress here, and I'd be happy to obviously show anyone around Marley as what we're delivering to date, is we do truly deliver as Hill tenure blind homes. So actually, in some ways, I think the tenure blindness point can fall away through good quality design and actually delivering that on site. I think then finally, the point I'd add in terms of this location is we were very, very keen, picking up on the comments raised, as I say, at the Land North for Cherry Hinton members briefing, that we found an area for these homes to be centred around what we're proposing as an adoptable route. Again, thinking about service charges, cost of living crisis. So that's a key priority for us, particularly on the affordable rent, to ensure that no affordable rent home here is served off a private road.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart, please. And developers, when you answer your questions, can you just be a bit punchier? Please, as I said before, you can exemplify your responses after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to pick up on a number of points that Councillor Fane made about sustainability and particularly about the value of communal facilities. So I'm thinking now down in the deep technical stuff of battery support, for example, for solar PV, about multiple home approaches to not just air source, but perhaps ground source, because in implementing communal facilities, in a sense, the barrier to technical sophistication is lowered. And so, for example, for noise control of a bigger unit, it's far easier and more cost-effective than noise control for a whole series of smaller units. So that's a general question about communal facilities. And I know batteries are significant here because people are out at work, they're not using their electricity. The fact that it can be buffered and used later, even if it's there's an efficiency cost, is very compelling. So that's my first question. Community group approaches to certain technologies. The second one, quite different, is the north-south road, the main road running through the development. I just have a feeling it's too straight and would pose a threat. It's an invitation to go at high speed in a motor vehicle. But I think just with the words about, would this be acceptable to county highways for adoption is really compelling on the other side. So where do we strike the balance and make a road where perhaps the street scene is confusing to drivers? This is actually quite important for slowing or reducing speeds. Use of open spaces, or shared spaces, between pedestrians, cyclists and motor vehicles. I know that's quite controversial, but it has been shown to work at reducing speeds, but on the other hand, might not be acceptable to county highways. So I wondered if you had some comments to make about that very straight north-south road and how it might be engineered in order for it to be appropriate for the development. Thank you, Chair.
I'd like to come in on the question about the road being too straight and obviously the speeding concerns. So the road typology follows what's already been set on phase one for Marley Avenue, which has been built and accepted by Cambridgeshire County Council Highways to combat the concerns around speed. There's speed control measures along the road, such as ramps and raised tables at junctions. And at those junctions, there's also a shared surface type of arrangement. As you've mentioned, so it really gives way to vehicles recognising that there's a change of level and also a change of surface for pedestrians, cyclists, and so on to make those moves. There's also pinch points, which has been discussed and sort of shown on some of the roads as well, to really sort of slow people down at key crossings. There's an east-west crossing that runs through the site. We're looking at quite a few options around there as well.
The only point I just quickly add on to Jason's comment is as well, the Austin Street, we're proposing a cycle lane as part of that route as well, which is, I think, a really positive sort of measure we've sought to introduce. And obviously that goes slightly hand in having a reasonably direct route up to connecting to the wider east to west cycle route up at Marley and through the development. Picking up your comments on sustainability, so in terms of communal, we're proposing, well, certainly at the moment, our intention is for a communal air source heating system for the apartments. The houses would have individual air source heat pumps. We have actually had discussions before with providers around a communal system for houses as well, which is starting to emerge. We're sort of seeing other schemes. The initial feedback we had for phase 3 was that just due to the size, it actually it's unlikely due to not kind of meeting the overall numbers of requirement to get that communal system to work for the houses. But as I was sort of alluded to earlier, we're still not quite there in terms of really sort of settling on our preferred overall sustainability strategy here. So at the moment, we're considering still all options. Everything you were
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Chair. Some of my points have been made, so I won't sort of stay too much on them, but I need to clarify something about the adoptable roads being down to county council, especially the example that you gave. Can you just clarify that for me, that they will not adopt anything that's less than, or that serves less than 12 houses? Is that correct?
Hi, I can answer that one. The road that Henry was referring to was just in the sort of north western part of phase 3. Mm-hmm. The roads link in with what's already been established under phase 2, and they are shared surface type streets in the sense where they are block paved and they don't have any footpaths on them. 6 metres width, curb to curb. When we discussed this with John Finney, Cambridgeshire County Council adopting highways engineer, the requirements for a shared surface is that it serves a maximum of 12 houses facing onto that highway. Now, as the phase 3 parcel was developed, the road then continues forward. There was already 12 units on phase 2, so we'd immediately be increasing on that. We've asked the question. We said in this particular case, specifically for the development, we'd still like to offer the road for adoption, and he said, unfortunately, that's not possible.
Thank you very much.
I'm not finished
I,
yet.
oh, sorry, I just wanted to clarify that business about the 12. Did you want to come back in?
That's why I'm asking for clarification, so we all understand what the limitations are and why it's the way it is.
What I was going to say is, with the greatest of respect, I don't recognise that. My understanding is that where a surface is for more than, normally it's under 12 houses, it's not an an adoptable surface. I'm finding it hard to understand why, if it serves more than 12 houses, it would not be to an adoptable standard. And I'm just saying I'm not sure that I recognise that. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it's not my understanding.
I think this is an issue we can take after we can take up after the meeting. But I do agree with you both. It is contrary to my understanding. Councillor Hawkins, you've got the floor still.
Anything else? I will not labour on that. Now, there was also talk about relocating the tennis court and the allotments. Now, bearing in mind the popularity of allotments these days, I don't think you actually said where you moved those to. Can we see that? Are they still there or not? And I think my final point will be on the clustering. You talked about being tenure blind. It's not just about tenure blindness. It's about the numbers that are in that location. And I think from what you've shown us, it's probably more than what is in our policy. So can you please clarify that? Thank you.
I think that's just a question to be noted. Okay. Councillor Pora. Oh, sorry, the tennis court one, yeah.
So we'll just try and get a slide up on the screen to put this into, this is probably helpful. So as part of the outline planning permission, on the sort of western area where there's on this screen a white sort of rectangle, actually falls within the Cambridge City demise, there were some tennis courts and allotments indicated on the land use parameter plans. Having had discussions with officers on this, because on the plains at the top right of Marley, we're delivering adult sports pitches, junior sports pitches, a sports pavilion, allotments in their area as well, and ancillary sort of uses to that. Our proposal is that the tennis courts would be better situated in that area to create sort of a sports hub. So it's around the sports pavilion. It's all sort of well connected together and serviced off what is currently the Construction Hall Road, which will in turn be a permanent route for that area. The Plains anyway has a high provision of allotments, so we're not seeking to change that. And in essence, by removing the elements envisaged on the area on the west as part of the outline, we're freeing up area to repurpose as different green space. So not housing, but different green space. And having discussions with officers today, it appears that there's a desire for us to provide a community garden in this area. And we're willing and happy to proceed with that approach. So that is now the detail that we're working up and looking how that will work. And in terms of the future, how it will be operated and how you get residents involved in designing that area. I'll just clarify what I haven't answered.
You said you'd relocate, you'd move the tennis courts and allotments that were meant for that section.
Yeah.
Where have the allotments gone? Are they still, have you added the number from there to
No,
where
so
you're proposing or not?
No, sorry, so to clarify, the Plains has a provision of allotments which will be delivered, so the area of the top right. There was a small then area of allotments and tennis courts on the western edge. As part of the proposals, officers have come back to us and confirmed that they'd like to see the tennis courts relocated to the plains. The allotments, no additional allotments provided on the plains, instead provide a community garden where the allotments were on the western edge. That still does leave allotment provision on the plains. Does that answer your question?
Can you just follow that in writing afterwards? And again, can I just remind you about being succinct in your responses? I've got a long list of people who want to speak. Okay, so we'll now, Bora, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll miss out the ones that have already been covered. Obviously, it's good to hear if there is an uplift, it will be a 40% affordable. I think that, and I think dual aspect is certainly something that our committee feels strongly is a good solution to climate change. And I would urge developers to think hard about including as many of those as possible, because single aspect really now is challenging. I would, as I always do, talk about car club spaces. You know, we really want to reduce car use, but I do believe if you don't provide car club spaces, it incentivises people to buy cars. So I would urge developers to consider that. And obviously things like cargo and adapted bike spaces, because particularly if you've got a lot of the 3 beds, you know, those are family homes, and that will allow people the option of not buying a car. I think it would be useful just to note that it'd be helpful to see the walking times to the green spaces when this comes forward in more detail. I'm sure you've considered that anyway. And it would also be useful to look at no garden sizes, because as you probably know, this committee before queried garden sizes, particularly for the larger homes that I think, and particularly if you're increasing density, that would be an issue, would be useful to be addressed. I know she mentioned block paving on the non-adopted roads. I know with trees and block paving, that isn't always a happy marriage. So again, I'd be keen to make sure that any trees that are planted aren't going to knock up that block paving so it becomes crooked, which then obviously costs if it's not an adopted road. And finally, I think you mentioned for one of the blocks that you're having surface parking. I'm interested about that. Obviously, I understand you need some parking, but certainly this is a relatively sustainable site with bus links into the city, with cycling infrastructure. So I think certainly it's something our local plan is keen to drive down the number of parking spaces, and I'd be a little concerned about using surface parking, and that could be avoided, certainly if it's going to be a big car park equivalent. Those seem to be a bit out of date nowadays. Thanks. Not particularly, I think they're really more to note, but particularly the surface car parking, that would be the one I'd be interested in.
Yes, if we just go to one of the slides, the surface parking area referred to is, we're trying to find a happy balance here between not creating that area too large, because ultimately, as you say, we don't want to create a sea of tarmac, but at the same time still providing enough provision that we think is going to be acceptable here. We firmly agree that we think this is a very sustainable location. We're very keen to explore some of the measures you've suggested, such as car club spaces as well. And ultimately, yeah, we just need to work that through with officers to understand if what we're proposing today would be an acceptable overall provision. I think the advantage of surface level parking is that in the future, if car needs change and the reliance on the car reduces, there isn't the ability to repurpose that area, which is certainly a strength over providing some other parking solutions, such as basement car parking, which was actually envisaged as part of Marley, as part of the outline, which we've sought to remove.
Councillor Levin, you're on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that. I just would like to declare that my daughter lives on Marley Estate, but my views are unfettered. So I just had a couple of questions. How much work has been done to ensure the long-term supply of water and even electricity on the estate? Question about the spine road. I think you called it Austin Road, which you described traffic as having to sort of go up and loop around to get back down. Looking at your diagram, it does look as if it has direct access to Newmarket Road, but I'd just like you to confirm that. Okay. And speed limits, will you be asserting 20-mile-an-hour speed limits throughout the estate? Thank you.
I'll cover the first two questions and then hand over to Jason for the sort of road and speed limit queries. In terms of water, yeah, fully appreciate and we're aware in terms of the challenges around this at the moment. We've sought to be sort of transparent and upfront about this and engaging with the Environment Agency. We actually have a pre-application meeting with the Environment Agency on Monday to run through our proposals because essentially, as we understand it, the Environment Agency are concerned about any new proposals, whilst the outline for 1,300 isn't as much of a concern. When they sort of heard that we were looking to increase the numbers, they need to be satisfied that that can be accounted for. We believe here, because there's an existing Northworks operation at Marshall with an existing water use, that we'll be able to have a sensible discussion with the Environment Agency and sort of overcome that concern. I would add as well the local planning authority, so I think Philip is attending that meeting also to hear those discussions firsthand. I would just say also we're aware of obviously where policy is at the moment on water usage and what the emerging policy Cambridge is seeking to get to in terms of 80 litres. So we're currently working out how far sort of below the 110 adopted policy that we can go to and bring that forward as part of our proposals when we submit the application. In terms of electricity, yes, when we went to phase 2 and did an air source heat pump strategy, there was a huge implication on loading that we needed. So we spent a considerable sum of money with our electricity provider to upgrade the supply to Mali. So we secured that power to ensure that all of phase 3 can be delivered with no concerns around availability of power on an air source heat pump strategy. Jason, can I just hand over to you to the loop road and speed limits?
Yeah. Austin Street will connect to Newmarket Road with a proposed junction that's traffic signalised. That's in accordance with an approved outline design. And the speed along all the roads is a 20-mile-an-hour design speed.
So are you satisfied?
Yeah, thank you.
Point of order.
Thank you. The planners are being referred to as Cambridge planners. They are Greater Cambridge planners. Please take note.
Okay, yes, just to remind you, it's a shared planning service between South Cambs District Council, Council Hawkins represents, and the city. Thank you. We are running out of time. I'm quite relaxed on this. If the rest of the committee is, we can do, if everybody's content to overrun a little. Content to do that. I mean, this is the purpose of the meeting. We've all got together at great expense to get here, so I'm not going to sort of impose a time limit on it. Okay, so Councillor Thornborough, please.
If necessary, these questions could come back. So I really agree with what Councillor Stobart was saying about community facilities to make the whole site really sustainable. And it goes down to even not relying on cars, which you said was a target. We really need to be seriously putting in community cars. We don't need an on-site a car for every single plot. We need huge percentage of community cars, 20% or something, because people will never have the option not to own their own car unless we do something drastic like that. And also for solar on flats, there are, in South Cambridge, the solar on flats benefits the community areas, but there are systems now where they can benefit each flat, even for small development of 4 flats. Each flat benefits because of the technology on batteries, and it's much more efficient because it's better if they're used while the sun is out. And if you have 6 flats, people are using them at different times. So that would be great to see. Allotments. If you're going to take the allotments away, that needs to be, for me, that needs to be specifically listed in the heading of the application. We have in our sustainable construction SPD, we've got a section on food growing. It is really important. And allotments are different from community garden use. I would really loath to see the allotments going, but I do think a community garden is a really good idea, but it needs to be more central, and the beta park would be fantastic for a community garden. And there's a great example at Clay Farm where we have allotments and we have a community garden, and that they are different. You can see how they're used. The community garden links with the junior school, and if it was more central in something like the Beta Park, you could link with the junior school. They could wander over and do some planting and growing.
Do you want to respond? I'll just take that away.
Yeah, to take those away, I think just to clarify on the allotments point, because I'm not sure I've done a very good job today, we are not preparing to remove all the allotments. It's just in isolation, the smaller element of the allotments that are on the western boundary.
I think you do that in writing so we can understand it. Right? We've struggled already with that one, so let's spend more time on that. I've got, was this pertinent to this question, Councillor Colling? Because it's Councillor Colling next and then you. Well, let's take you then, and then you can ask your question.
I mean, I was going to ask about the community gardens and allotments, but what interests me is that is how this is going to be managed afterwards. Because you talk about the community gardens, how they're going to be managed. I think it's always a rather complicated situation. You design the greenery and the open spaces around an area before you've got the residents. And you don't really know what the resident's going to be. First of all, you don't know who the resident's going to be, because the balance may be different than is planned, and you don't know what they want and desires. So how are you going to maintain the interaction between what's provided on the green spaces and the residents ongoing, and how are you going to be able to modify as the residents come in? What's the link going to be with the residents in terms of liaison? I see Councillor Thornborough seems to have something linked to that.
Can I just come back on that point? Because at Clay Farm, the community garden was all set out. The residents came in, they were late delivering it. So we worked with the residents, and it was redesigned, and a new planning application was put in because they knew they were there, they were living there. And that is why it is so successful, because the people who were there had a final input, and they are all looking after it, and it's a great asset. So it's very important that the way it comes through, it makes a difference.
That's Bradman.
Sorry, on the allotment point, one of the reasons for putting allotments on that western plot is because in the initial plan, this was going to be likely to be more affordable housing. And the whole purpose of putting allotments there is so that people who are in affordable housing have a close route to allotments where they can grow their own food. And so actually, I do object. Sorry. I would be delighted if we could maintain allotments in this location. I'd ask you to consider the location of allotments.
Councillor Keith.
Can I suggest that Councillor Bradman stops there at that point?
Let's just be clear that was a concern that was just expressed. Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Khan, you leapt in. It was Councillor Carling's turn, so we'll take Councillor's.
Thank you. Most of my points have been addressed by now, but I do have one left, which is I'd like to hear a bit more about how most of the green space is going to be maintained. Is it expected to be maintained by the local authorities or managed externally at a cost to residents? And also, is thought being given to water efficiency with respect to the green space? I think Councillor Levine touched on that we are having problems in Cambridge with water availability. So are we looking at, for example, are you looking at drought-resistant plants and such like to occupy those green spaces and reduce the need for watering?
Yeah, so just firstly with the green space, open space question, so we at Marley have a company called the Land Trust, who are the estate management company who've been appointed. And yeah, so essentially what happens is as Marley is phased out, Hill Marshall, when they've delivered green spaces, they hand over to the Land Trust, who then take the management and maintenance of those areas forward. So they will cover the whole of Marley from today and over the next 10 years in terms of when we delivered, and then into sort of effectively perpetuity. So we've already got a mechanism in place for the management. The question, sorry, on water, could I just clarify? Could you repeat what you were asking on that, please?
Essentially, just we have a problem in Cambridge with a lack of water availability, and obviously water in green spaces can account for some of that. So I'm just wondering if kind of thought is being given to selecting plants that need less watering, and such like drought-resistant plants, sort of thing.
Yep, if I hand over, Anna, would you be happy to take that one?
Yes, well, thank you for your question. We are at early stages of the design, and obviously we're looking at the planting scheme that would be suitable for this location and for conditions in Cambridge. So we'll be looking at, and with the emergency and climate crisis, we need to focus on specifying the plants that would be able to sustain kind of harsher climate conditions. So that will be kind of brought forward at later design stages.
You content, Councillor Carling. Yeah, thank you. So I'm going back to Councillor Khan. You're all right. Okay, that's grand. Thank you. We've got Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood, who's been waiting patiently online.
Do you want the camera on or off? Hello?
Oh, can you ask your questions, please, Jenny?
Okay. Well, fortunately, a lot have been already put forward. The size of the just clarify the size of the communal park, and then the number of allotments that will be delivered on the Plains area, the distance, the furthest distance from housing to that Plains area. In other words, really the time to walk to allotments and the other facilities. I wonder if you could comment a bit on biodiversity again. Bins, are you adopting the system they have in Eddington? And then on the rented and affordable accommodation, can I just check it is all rented, or will all be affordable rent? And I know it's an early stage, but who will be managing this? And then on, yes, it's something that I know Councillor Thornborough often raises, that in the rented accommodation that people will be separately metered for water and the other utilities. Okay. Oh, and parking, we've touched on this, and EV chargers. So really where the parking is located, I assume that all the private housing will have to have EV chargers following building regulations, but wondered about the affordable and apartment blocks. Thank you.
There's a lot there to rattle through, but please do rattle through it.
Okay, I'll do my best to try and capture all of those. I think in terms of size of green spaces and distances, that'd probably be better if we could take that one away and actually provide that information to you, because I don't have it off the top of my head, but very happy to provide that. Biodiversity, yes. As we're starting to get into more of the detail of the scheme, working with our ecologist and landscape architect, we'll be looking to maximise the provisions of biodiversity measures across the scheme. It should be noted, it obviously is existing brownfield site, so by delivering phase 3 proposals, there's certainly going to be a significant improvement, we're hoping, in terms of biodiversity. Bin system in Eddington, no, we're not looking to replicate the bin system that is being used there. In terms of tenure split of the affordable, that's in line with, on the 3A application, that's in line with the outline, the section 106, which is 70% shared ownership, 30% affordable rent. But then in terms of the new application, which would be bound by up-to-date policies, that would be in line of 40% affordable housing, 70% affordable rent, 30% shared ownership. Water metering, yep, we'll take that one away and we'll consider that as part of our sort of detailed strategy. And then parking and EV. So parking provision for houses will predominantly be on plot. For the apartments, there'll be either podium, surface level or undercroft parking. And in terms of EV charging, as you alluded to, yeah, that is now secured by building regs actually, albeit we were providing that prior to that change on previous phases of Marley. So irrespective of tenure, yeah, that will be provided both on houses and apartments.
Councillor Flobart, would you like to ask your questions?
Hello, I just have two questions. I'm not going to repeat some of the questions that have already been covered, but I'm actually interested in knowing whether the play areas would be sort of available in stages or what the plan is. So I would be grateful if you could clarify that. Then in terms of the communal areas that would be handed over to the city council, I would like to know if there is a plan, because at the moment we have sort of many concerns and many problems in Trumpington with this, because sometimes they are not maintained to the highest standards, and residents, they usually have to maintain them themselves. So if you could clarify these 2 points, please. Thank you.
So firstly, just dealing with the play areas, yes, so there'll be the required play provision across phase 3, and that will be delivered in accordance with the phasing of how the scheme's built out. We're not quite sure yet at this early stage how we envisage the scheme to be phased into build parcels, but yeah, essentially it will be delivered alongside the parcels. In terms of the communal areas, as alluded to earlier, so the Land Trust are already appointed at Marley. They're in place for the estate management. And ultimately, you know, whilst we don't hope this is a situation, if they weren't performing in terms of actually looking after these areas, then Hill Marshall will have have that involvement and control in terms of ensuring that they do, or looking at alternative measures.
I'm not taking any more questions because we have overrun. Sorry to frustrate that. So I want to ask some questions to just make some closing remarks. So I think I've got 5 to make. The first one was the reference to the exemplar for sustainable development. The exam question is around how far is this development going to be from the ambition for zero carbon by 2050 and the 80 litres of water per day, which will be part of the emerging local plan. And I think that's the, if you like, the litmus test against a vision for exemplar sustainable development. The other issue which came out of the discussion, I thought, was around this question, this tension between being tenure blind and pepper potting of the affordable housing. The concern about the number of single aspect dwellings that might be within that affordable housing, and the service charge regime relating to them. And I've got regard to the comments that you made about settling the affordable housing in a location in which they weren't going to be burdened with excessive service charges, like minimising the service charges. And that would be interesting, I think, when this comes for consideration. We're going to take away this question of the shared service and the adoptable standard with highways, which is another reference back to the service charges. And I think as you've heard the discussion that we had on land north of Cherry Hinton, and it's in the public domain, isn't it? The controversies around freeholders and leasehold charges and service charges and all the rest of it. And this is sort of out with planning, but it's part of, we represent our communities and we see this kind of thing going on, which we're concerned about. And it's basically about social justice, having equity and a governance regime there that your customers will possibly be asking for. It's almost business advice, if you like, that's coming from a community perspective. And the fourth one relates to open spaces. And I think that in the design, there's a difference between the design on a layout on a plan and actually how it works out in reality. And I think we have concern about the way in which the paths across the open spaces actually become desire lines for fast-moving two-wheelers. And that creates a conflict with children who are not necessarily aware of the dangers and risks of the two-wheelers. And so you bisect or atomize the open space into between safe areas and not so safe areas. And I think you need to be privileging the children and their safety. And I think that's something that we've seen before and we've commented on and will continue to comment on. I think the other thing we've seen is the great success of locally equipped areas of play. And the higher the standard of those, it's just a small amount of investment in kit in an area of play that intensifies their uses and makes them really special places for children to go to. And it's a lifesaver for parents, quite frankly. And I think the point that Councillor Flobart made about the phasing is really important, because it's, the first people are moving in, they have a need, and it's really desperate situation if they have to wait 2 years, which we've seen elsewhere in the city. And finally, we will out of the meeting, we will address the tennis court and allotment enigma, and have perhaps further reflection on that question of community gardens and the community development activities that need to go in bringing them live once people are moving in, so they're fully utilised. Councillor Poyle is insisting on asking one more question. What's the last word?
Sorry, I forgot earlier. Grey water recycling. We've had very few come forward with this, but certainly any developer who's thinking of intensifying the numbers, given the water shortage, I think that grey water reuse, I appreciate it's technically challenging, but it's not impossible, and I think that would be worth considering. No answer required.
Thank you very much. I've got to refer to my notes now. What I'd just like to do now is thank you very much for your presentation, and we welcome that, really appreciate it. I hope that you've been able to get the feel of where we're from as a committee, and if you want to respond further to the questions post-meeting, then please do so. So thank you. That ends that part of this agenda item. Thank you very much. Does everybody like a break now? I think this is the first time I've remembered it without being prompted. So yay, learning. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we now move to agenda item 3. This is land adjacent to Cambridge Biomedical Campus, Cambridge. It's Cambridge South Station, a new 2-storey, 4-platform station on the West Anglia Main, adjacent to the Cambridge Biomedical Campus and associated works to the rail infrastructure. The developer is Network Rail. So we're just going to start with a short update from Principal Planning Officer Mairead O'Sullivan. So Mairead, you can just take on, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Mairead O'Sullivan, Principal Planning Officer in the Strategic Sites team, and I'm here today to provide an update on the Cambridge South Station project. So the idea is to provide members with an update on the Transport and Works Act order decision and the next steps. The intention is that conditions will be dealt with under delegated powers, but the idea is to provide an update given that the project has wider public interest. So just briefly to touch on the Transport and Works Act, the station was dealt with under the Transport and Works Act, and these applications are determined by the Secretary of State. The Act itself and the order doesn't grant planning permission, but an organisation can seek planning permission from the Secretary of State at the same time as the Transport and Works Act order, and that was the case in this instance. So then to touch on, the decision was made in December of last year. The red line shows the kind of wider area covered by the Transport and Works Act order. You'll see that the order also, as well as granting permission for the construction of the station, also permitted works to the tracks and to the Shepwreck Junction, in particular down here to the south, as well as granting planning permission subject to 39 conditions. Just to give a kind of timeline for the order, the application was submitted in June of 2021 with public inquiry in February of March of last year. As I said, the decision was issued in December of last year, and the first discharge of condition applications were submitted in January. And this is ahead of an expected start on site on the 13th of March, subject to discharge of all pre-commencement conditions. It's worth noting the very fast turnaround in terms of the decision being made and the first conditions being submitted is due to the funding that the station is provided under. It's called Project Speed, and it requires that Network Rail do everything to move forward the project as quickly as possible. But it should be noted that Network Rail have been engaging with the local authorities over the autumn period to ensure a kind of smooth discharge of condition process. So at the moment we're dealing with the pre-commencement conditions associated with the first few phases of development. I've listed out the conditions we're dealing with. The phasing plan condition is a useful one to review, as this sets out the different phases of development and the conditions which will be discharged at each phase. The other conditions we're dealing with are the Code of Construction Practice, which deals with a kind of wide range of the kind of impacts associated with construction, like lighting, noise, traffic. We're also dealing with conditions to do with ecology, archaeology, contaminated land, soil management, drainage, and trees. So the next steps will be the discharge of these pre-commencement conditions. The application is due to go for review by Temperature Quality Panel at the end of February. There will be further work to refine the design following on from Quality Panel today's session and some workshops that were held last week with the local authority. As I say, the Network Rail are expecting to start on site in March, and the submission of the next phase of conditions, which is for phase 4, is expected in April. So just to touch on these then, phase 4 is to do with the beginning of construction of the station itself, and that will result in the need to discharge conditions to do with drainage, biodiversity, and more detailed kind of design elements. Condition 17 is to do with the design of the station itself and is the most substantial condition. attached to the consent. And that's what today's briefing from the developer is about. So it's probably a good place for me to hand over. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ray. That was helpful. I'm now going to introduce invite the Network Rail Works Town Planning Manager, Elliot Stamp, to make his presentation. So welcome, Elliot. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for letting us come along today to provide you with an update on the Cambridge South Station project. As the Chair mentioned, I'm Elliot Stamp, Network Rail's Town Planning Manager covering the Anglia route. I'm joined by my colleagues Jan Cruz from Faraday Pollard and Ben Hilder from Arcadis to run through the presentation. Got quite a few elements to go through. Just as you can see on your screen here, we'll be giving you an overview of the design stage and the key design changes since the TWAO submission. We'll be giving an overview on sustainability and BREEAM, and then looking at the access, pedestrian, cyclist and vehicular parking in and around the station. And then the focus will turn on into architecture and landscaping, so looking around the interface with Hobson's Park, the function and layout of the building, and the appearance and materiality of the building itself. And we're just going to follow off with a small slide around engagement, some of the engagement pieces we've been doing. Mairead's done a very good job in setting the scene, so I won't dwell on this slide too much. As Mairead informed you earlier, we received approval from the Secretary of State on the 21st of December for the Transport and Works Act order, and the order came into effect in the 11th of January. In planning terms, this gave us permission for the scheme, which we now need to deliver in line with the parameter plans and the design principles which were submitted as part of the TWAO order. And as Mairead pointed out, we've got 39 planning conditions associated to the consent. And we've been working with Greater Cambridgeshire planning officers over the last few months in and around those conditions. This session will focus specifically on the station design and landscaping. And that's probably a good point for me to hand over to Jan.
Thank you, Elliot. So just picking up some of the key things we think you'll be interested on is how we've moved the station on since the TWA submission. This drawing is an illustration of an overview of the proposals at TWAO, and the intent and the location of the station just south of the guided busway, adjacent to the biomedical campus, and on the fringe of the green belt, the Hobson's Brook and Hobson's Park, to the left of the screen, and the connections into that station are all predominantly the same, including a crossing over the guided busway into the active recreational area. This illustration is of those proposals at TWO. It's very much about identifying the need of the station and how big that needs to be to operate, and what that sort of massing and impact is and the environmental impact is in that particular location. As we've developed the scheme, we're better informed and can identify what we need to operate the station. So that station and the form has begun to develop, and we've looked to reduce that impact and reduce that footprint to something that's more efficient. We've also had more engaging input with the potential operator of that station to have a better understanding of that and the plant needed to operate it. This illustrates on the left what we had at TWO and our understanding of that, and on the image on the right is how we've developed that and refined it and kept the spirit of the design principles, which were integrated in the design and access statement, and I have progressed that. So you can see on this image here, this is a plan layout of the station. Left is south and right is north towards Cambridge. So it was very much a spatial planning exercise, identifying how it would work and operate. And as we've developed that over the last year, we're giving more form and more intent to what that is. That's this image here. So we're still looking at, for instance, 1,000 cycle parking spaces across both sides of the station, and public access into the station from both sides, and vehicle access from the east, from the AstraZeneca side. But in summary, the changes between TWO and where we are now is reducing that footprint, so it makes it more efficient. We've brought the circulation, so the lifts and stairs, we brought them together so it's easier to navigate and more rational. There's no roof to a secondary means of escape footbridge to the south, and it's also a single span, so smaller in volume and mass. And there's some ramps at the end of the platforms 1 and 4, so they're each side of the railway. They've been reorientated to both direct passengers away from the station and also reduce their impact on the AstraZeneca site. And we now have a better understanding of how the station will be staffed, or it's aimed to be staffed, and that's that they will be mobile and around without having the formality of, say, for instance, a larger ticket office, which increases that space, but it also helps us understanding the operation and how passengers and staff will move around the station and informs that design. Something besides the site and the design principles and the response to the locality, one of the key things is sustainability and BREEAM, and that is really like another layer of influence to that station. So with the limited time we have, I'm just going to touch on the fact that we're still targeting BREEAM Excellent. Our design target is 76.69%. We need to reach 70%, so it's always good practice to have a bit of an overrun. But in broad terms, what does this mean to our design? It means that we're looking at things like glare, maximizing daylight levels in the design, ensuring there are views out of the occupied spaces, looking at the air quality and the ventilation, considering lighting levels, looking at emissions from the construction products, so the materials. We're looking at thermal modeling, thermal comfort in space, and making sure and measuring things around the station and implementing controls in the design so they can be managed. We look at things like staff well-being and the spaces they're in, also ensuring there is energy monitoring, lighting controls. We're also looking at minimizing water consumption. We've integrated a grey water system into the design. We're also, of course, looking at efficient equipment and leak detection. And also the materials are quite key, which I'll come across into a minute, ensuring, for instance, they've got recognised environmental product declarations. And we've also got to look to ensure that the design's robust and has a long life, looking at segregation of waste as well for the operator. And also, quite important is looking at ways of improving the site ecology. So in the landscape element we'll see later on, for instance, we're looking at species that attract red starts, which are in the area. And of course, minimizing things like surface runoff. In terms of access and how that station works, it's still exactly the same as it was in TWAO, with public vehicles accessing the station in orange, you see on this diagram, from Adams Brooks Road or Dame Mary Archway, and then along Francis Crick Avenue into the station forecourt. Cyclists, part of the consultation was to minimise impact on the park and protect that as an amenity. So we've looked at the connections around the site, connecting into NCM 11, and also the proposal is for the station forecourt on the east to have a dedicated cycleway, and on the west we've got a shared cycle and pedestrian way running parallel to guided busway to the north. And of course, pedestrians can use the same route. We're looking at integration with the bus services on Francis Crick Avenue, and of course, you can use the more informal path through Hobson's Park, and the one shown dashed cutting through the park is where that's one we're adjusting to provide access and level access into the station. On the subject of architecture and landscape, I'll just hand over to my colleague Ben.
Hi, thank you, Jan. Yes, it's been vitally important that throughout this process, throughout the TWAO stage and then now the detailed design, that we keep clear the importance of integrating the scheme into Hobson's Park and the green belt there. So all the labels there are ones that we were part of the original design and ones that we're seeing through now. So you can see that the majority of the established tree belts on the eastern side of the park are retained as per the application, and we're now working up detail for the planting in the dark green areas there, in coordination with your officers to choose species sizes, planting methods, etc. And that will be detailed in the condition submissions. So that's an important part of integrating the scheme into its setting. The purple line above the station is an indication that we're developing a green roof on the building as it was per the application stage, and the details of that, and that will help visually integrate the scheme into its setting. And in general, the dashed line waving its way through the park is just an indication that that sense of openness through the park, once construction is finished, will be maintained. The wildflower grassland that is there at the moment will be restored, and the path network knitted back together. Okay, next slide, please, Jan. And this is just an indication of some of the detail that we're producing, which is sections. So the top one showing the station on the right hand side, and then the maturing existing tree belt on the left. The station is on a raised element of land, so that there's a step-free access from outside the station to the platforms, which is obviously vitally important. And then to the western edge of the bank of earth created for the station, there's a gentle slope, as you can see in that thick black line, leading down to the existing vegetated edge. As the scheme moves further south through Hobson's Park, in indication of that central section, ground levels are more similar to what they are, and there's less earthworks required. And the last section at the bottom is just a cross section through the new pedestrian and cyclist path that will exist across the north side of Hobson's Park, which again has to raise itself up from the existing ground level in order to meet that station platform area. Okay, thanks, Jan. Next slide. Back to you.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you. So key access provision in here, as you can see on this slide in front of you, is exactly the same as the TWO. We're looking at 5 blue badge parking spaces and help points outside the station. We've got 3 drop-off parking spaces, pick-up and drop-off parking spaces, 3 taxi pick-up and drop-off spaces. We've got 2 accessible staff and a maintenance parking space to the east. And then there's access to Francis Cricket Avenue to access the buses. Each side of the station, or across the station extent, we've got 1,000 cycle parking spaces. And as I mentioned earlier, each side of the railway has access for cyclists and pedestrians, and on the east as cars as well. We have a changing places room in the station, and also we've got ambulance accessible WCs and PRM WC on both sides of the station.
So,
in terms of,
can I just say that you've got 2 more minutes now? So, are you getting close to the end? Okay.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's indicated on this layout onto the east, and the cycle parking layouts also to the east. So there's a combination of different types and sizes and so forth, and also an enclosed section for more secure, and that's the same on the west side. In terms of the articulation and the space, we've got twin lifts for redundancy, and also increased car sizes to support a wider range of mobility. And we have a stair and footbridge, stair and lift combination that brings you through the station. It's quite a feature over to an overbridge that joins the 2 stations. It's a very wide overbridge to allow for cyclists and mobility. Over to you, Ben.
Yeah, this just shows the more layout of the park itself, including the main path across the top there, with some wayfinding to get to the station on the western edge, and the reinstatement of the path network through which I mentioned earlier. So that's fine, Jan. You can move on.
Right.
Outside the station, it shows the routes that we've planned for cyclists and pedestrians to get to the storage area and to get into the station itself, where maintenance vehicles will tuck themselves to the station's north, and emergency vehicles will have an area for set down where needed to the south of the station. Okay, thanks, Jan. And a similar pattern on the eastern side there, with segregation of the cyclists and pedestrians on their routes to the station and the parking. Okay, Jan, that's fine.
So just on the appearance and the materiality, one of the things we've looked at is how we responded to the emerging context, especially to the biomedical campus, and we reflect some of those materials. And this illustrates the components of the station. So the lower image is effectively the operational aspect, and then we have an envelope with red steel and natural materials and feature glazing over that to give the traditional station openness and lightness. And on top of that, we've got a blue-green, a green roof with also photovoltaics, sustainable drainage, sedum, and also more intense biodiversity areas. And we're developing that materials palette, and then also developing the detail of that form and the glazing. And the connection to the parts is developing models in 3D. And then the as mentioned earlier on, the BREEAM and the materials. It's very important to look at the sustainability aspects, but also the neutral aspect of that, and wayfinding is clear and clean.
And this demonstrates some of the materiality in the landscape, using the native species, picking up on the wildflower meadow and the species and mixes within that, but using robust materials around the station, such as granite, permeable paving where necessary to help with flood alleviation, but also using softer materials as it drifts towards the park in terms of picking up on the materials already used there, self-binding gravel and gravels and the like. So it's a case of integrating it into the setting, and that goes for the roof as well, the green roof, where we've got a mixture of sedum on the upper areas where it's closest to the overhead wires, and the accessibility isn't so easy. And then a more biodiverse roof, more accessible on above the cycle parking areas.
Thank you, Elliot. Just the last minute over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben and Jan. Just quickly,
can you be really brief now, please? Because
I will. I'll do it.
Thank you.
Super speedy. So we carried out significant engagement with stakeholders and public during the TWA process, and we are continuing this as part of the planning, condition, and construction phases of the project. So just a quick overview on the slide. We have periodic meetings with a number of the key campus stakeholders, such as AZ and University of Cambridge. We also have regular meetings with local groups such as the Trumpeting Residents Association and Cambridge Past, Present and Future. And our contractor Murphy's will be issuing monthly notification letters and newsletters to keep the local residents well informed of the project and upcoming works. And that's it for today. So thank you, and I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. So back over to yourselves.
So thank you very much. The officers are advising that the bulk of the discharge of conditions can be dealt with under delegated authority, with the exception of the station design, which they're suggesting is brought back to this committee for determination. In respect of the other conditions, as you've just heard, the officers and the applicants are working with stakeholders and the community. So I think we can be assured that those processes will be done to the standards that we require and we expect. So that would be the proposal to deal with this discharge of conditions. So can I just then ask you to put your questions, seek clarifications on the developer's presentation, and reminded not to express any opinions on the presentation proposals so as to suggest or imply a closed mind. So the suggested topics relate to design and landscape, access and movement, and sustainability. So I'm going to start from this side of the room this time to be for balance. So I got Councillor Thornborough, Bain, Pora, yes, Councillor Hawkins. Have I got someone on Gawthorpe Wood? Hibbert, Fane, and last but not least, Councillor Braddon. Okay, thank you. So let's just start with Councillor Thornborough, please.
Yeah, I would like to know how much land was lost from Hobson Park, and I believe that there was a gain in land, some land for landscaping in south of the station. So I'd like to see where that is and just to be assured that that is part of the landscaping and biodiversity scheme. I'm also interested to know where the construction huts are going to be. Again, my understanding it might be on the eastern side of the site, but there's a triangle of land which is south of Adam Brooks Road near the 9 Wells, and I know that that's very high in biodiversity, so I just wanted to check that that's not compromised by construction. And there, on the emergency and maintenance access is on the park, on the Western Park side. Why is it not being considered on the eastern side? You know, basically to reduce the land loss on Hobson's Park. You've shown 3 drop-off places. If this is not successful in that you get a huge demand of cars coming in for those 3 drop-off places, can it be reviewed and actually not have 3 drop-off places, have it be, add it to for the disabled in the future, if that causes a problem? And finally, how are bicycles going to be taken onto the trains? So it looks like the stairs. I think there's some really nice. Well, I like some of the images where you look. It's almost like ramps and stairs. And is it possible to push your bike up and over and bring it down to the middle platform? Or might it be possible to consider that, because that might help for accessibility, but also really encourage bike use and taking your bikes to other stations? Thank you.
I can probably
Do you address those questions then, please? Thank you.
Yeah, so we've actually got some further colleagues who've joined the call as well, so we might get them to get involved to answer some of the questions as well. I'll start off with the land situation around Hobson's Park. So as part of the scheme, we were required to take open space from Hobson's Park as part of the permanent development. So we had to deliver some exchange land. So to the south of Adam Brooks Road, we have acquired land through the TWAO process to re-provide public open space that has lost from the park. And that will also form part of the landscaping scheme, as you mentioned earlier. So that's that point. I don't have the specific figures off the top of my head, but it's something we can come back to you on if you're happy for us to do so. I take that as a yes. The construction plan, we've actually got our principal contractor, Michael Collins, on the call. So Michael, I don't know whether you could just comment on terms of the actual location of the temporary construction compound.
Yes, can. Yeah, apologies for the background noise. So due to the tight constraints of the site itself, we've set up a number of different access areas and smaller and larger compounds associated with those areas for the need of the work. They're broadly speaking in the south, as pointed out around 9 Mills Bridge. There will be on the western side a main sort of office area, as it were, and that's going to run parallel to the railway just north of Nine Wells Bridge, Addenbrooke's Road. And that's, like I said, going to be the main site offices. Now, the reason we put that there is that it's away from the main roads, away from the biomedical campus, and it allows us to get vehicles off of any of the main roads and facilitate parking for staff in that particular area. Going to the north, we have the main construction area for the station, the eastern side itself. So within Hobson's Park, and due to the way that the railway needs to be constructed, it does need a fairly large area of Hobson's Park to construct track panels. So, you know, the panels will come in 20-metre sections. They need to be built up, and then they can be placed on the railway during one long weekend. So they do need a fairly sizable area. Now, we're keeping that as much as possible in Hobson's Park because it facilitates a lot wider use of area, which we're compensating, as touched on earlier, in the exchange land. On the eastern side, we're very conscious, working through the construction logistics planning with Cambridge Biomedical Campus and stakeholders there, to reduce the use of the main roads, Francis Crick Avenue and Dame Way. So we've restricted the use there to very much be more about construction on days. So again, south of Addenbrooke's Road and Nine Wells Bridge, there's a small construction area in St John's Farm that's going to facilitate works from the south end of the site, and at the north end of the site, where you've got the eastern forecourt, we've got again a small compound, sort of satellite compound set up to enable the works, welfare facilities for the team working there, and some localised storage. So very much trying to keep within the constraints of the station itself, accepting that there will need to be an expansion of that to facilitate the works. Hopefully that answers that question.
Can I just ask you, the Network Rail team, can you just be succinct in your answers? When it's a complex answer, you can submit that in writing to us afterwards, but we do need, the value of this session is that you hear all the questions from the councillors, and we get the gist of the substance of the answers, and we can wait for the details after, otherwise we're going to be here all day. So if we could just crack on with succinct answers, please. Thank you.
Elliot, should I help on the third question, the emergency access? Yeah, so as I understand it, emergency access is required to both sides of the station. So there will be provision for emergency vehicles to get to both sides of the station. Your concern obviously was through Hobson's Park. The emergency access to the station on the west side will utilise an existing maintenance track that exists on the site at the moment. It will run along the south side of Addenbrooke's Road and go up very close parallel with the railway on an existing track. That existing track will be resurfaced, but be resurfaced with grass pavers, so paving materials that grass grows through. So for the majority of the time, it will not appear like a path, but it will be a grass track. But it's essential that emergency access gets to both sides. Okay.
I can pick up cycles, Elliot.
Cheers. Yeah.
So, thank you. So for cycles, we've got a series of lifts long enough for bicycles, pairs of twos, and there's stairs up to the overbridge and down to the platform. In consultation with officers, they have asked us to investigate putting in cycle tracks onto the stairs like they do at Cambridge North.
And then I think the last point was around drop-off places. So obviously the train operating company will manage that area and we'll review it. Obviously drop-off places will be required, but we're carefully considering the design of the forecourt, and we've been in discussion with the county highways and also Greater Cambridgeshire planning officers last week during some in-depth design sessions, so that'll be progressing.
Yeah, so Councillor Devine, can you please answer?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I would just say I have a particular interest in this because this is right on the very edge, or maybe included in my ward, I'm not quite sure actually, but will certainly be of great interest to people in Trumpington in particular. I think you've answered the question, vehicle access to the west side. I think you answered that along the way, but obviously construction traffic is going to be fairly heavy for a long time. So that's just a thought. You referred to an SME bridge, which I think was an emergency access bridge, being narrowed in size. If I understood that correct, I'm not sure that making an emergency access bridge smaller is a good idea. Just a thought, if I understood that correctly. Bicycles.
Jan, are you best placed to just provide an update on the SME bridge?
Yes. Apologies, David. I probably didn't explain it quite well. First of all, the sizes of all the stations are tested with dynamic modelling, but the SME bridge is not being reduced in capacity. It's it being a single span, not a double span. So it brings passengers from the Central Island platform to platform 4 in the park.
Single, not double.
Not in height. So originally it's spanned from platform 4 across to the island platform, and then from the island platform across to platform 4. So effectively connecting four platforms. We're just connecting the island platform. It serves to get the passengers off the island platform out to the park. It's not needed to bring them to both sides of the railway. We don't need to do
that. Bicycles. To see a bicycle park in Cambridge that isn't absolutely jam-packed with bicycles in the daytime. You've said there's 1,000 spaces. Is that 1,000 on each side or 500 on each side?
That's 500.
500 on each side. I don't know how much of this is your responsibility, but bicycle parks, I assume they'll be covered. I'd be interested to know what security arrangements will be in place, if that's your responsibility, whether there'll be cameras, that will take will be constantly on and not so much monitored by somebody all the time, but whether the footage would be available throughout the day. I do hear horror stories about Cambridge Station where cyclists come back at night to find their bicycle gone. They ask security, have you got that on tape? Have you got that videoed? And they say, when was it stolen? Well, I don't know. Well, in that case, we can't look at the footage. So if this may not be your responsibility, but if it is, please bear in mind that we need better security for bicycles. This is a bicycle city. We need better security for bicycles than we've got at, currently at the main station. Thank you.
Thank you. Just in very brief answer. I think some of those misstatements. All the cycle parking is covered. Part of it is enclosed, and all of it is in the vicinity of the staffed building. Unlike in Cambridge, where it's a much bigger area, and all of it is covered with CCTV, which has constantly on. I'm not responsible though for the access of that CCTV and how that's managed. But thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I certainly welcome the grey water, having commented in the last one we didn't have any, so that's a positive. I think you mentioned there wasn't going to be a formal ticket office and more roving staff. Could I just confirm there will be staff on site when the station's open? Because in terms of your accessibility, it's great to see changing places, toilet and things like that, but obviously for safety as well, particularly late at night, people will be coming from Addenbrooke's working shifts. I think it would be useful to know that if there's not a ticket office, there is still a presence there. Second question was about kind of the wayfinding and desire lines. So you showed the cycle routes as going round the park, but the pedestrian routes going through the park. I have several large parks in my ward, and we have a constant conflict. I think the Chair mentioned it in the last application with high-speed cycles and pedestrians. So I just wondered what you were thinking in terms of how you would manage the potential conflict of cyclists wanting to come across the park, taking the most direct route to get to the station, rather than staying on the cycle paths. and whether that's something that needs to be addressed by officers in some kind of travel management plan. And finally, I think you had 3 taxi spaces. I think from the city centre station, we've learnt that taxis like to queue. So and I think it picks up on Councillor Thornborough's point about how we manage the cars. Obviously, for those with disabilities, we need to have accessible spaces. But I just wonder where the taxis are going to go. Because, for example, in the city centre, we have a backup rank somewhere else with a sign that tells them when it's free to move on. But I could see that potentially causing some problems with, understandably, we're going to have big fluxes when huge trains with people maybe wanting to go to Trumpington, not just the biomedical campus. And finally, just a quick one, the lux levels, the light levels near the park, I'm assuming that is going to be controlled quite tightly with conditions, referencing various other items that have come forward to committee recently regarding light near parks. It would be useful just to know from officers if you're confident that that's not going to damage any of the wildlife habitat. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan, I think you were going to say about that the station would be staffed, but there's no kind of formal booking office. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what we're designing it to and working with the operator for. Yes.
Yeah, and the point around wayfinding is again a point we've been in detailed discussion with officers on how best to integrate the station wayfinding with the wider wayfinding in the area. And the question around pedestrian interaction with cyclists is something we were looking at as well closely with the county and officers at Greater Cambridgeshire Planning to ensure we make the best choice there, and it's being developed as we move forward with the project. Taxi queues and spaces, again, we are working on the forecourt design. It's a point we'll consider as part of that design progresses. And lux levels, yes, it's a condition. We do have a condition requiring submission of details of lighting.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep mine simple. Just going back to the station not having an office, will there be ticket machines, presumably, so that people can stop there and get their tickets online? From the machine. You had a list of what you call the key access provision, where you listed the blue badges, kiss and ride, parking spaces, and taxi pickups. I just wondered how you came about those numbers, because my daughter uses Cambridge North, and there's something similar there. And there are times when there's too many of us waiting to pick up and drop off. And not just Cambridge North station. So did you actually have a look at that? I'm just thinking, perhaps that's something you need to sort of have a look at again, because when it starts being used, what you might provide with just those numbers might not be sufficient. And then there's no way to make it any better. And last but not least, for me, is I guess this is where I got confused. You've reduced the platform length. And I'm wondering how many train carriages will what you have now planned actually provide access to? Because when you're in the train, that means you have to walk up to wherever it is you can get out, or something like that. Maybe I'm confused. I am confused. So perhaps that can be clarified. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, so yes, there will be ticket machine provision on both the western and eastern forecourt, and we're in discussion with officers again around the best location for them. In terms of the platform question, I think we've actually reduced the platform canopy, so not the platform itself, so it won't impact the kind of length of trains. It's actually just the canopy length has been reduced. And then the numbers of spaces, again, maybe one of my colleagues can speak to more about the detail in getting to those numbers, but as you can see from the site, we've got a very tight site there in terms of land availability. Obviously, the western side of it is, we're keen to restrict any kind of vehicular movements there other than emergency provision due to its the Hobson's Park and the green belt. And then within the eastern forecourt, we've got really tight sight there. So that is one of the driving factors, and also we're looking to reduce vehicular movements to the site as much as possible, but with the merit that certain vehicles do need to access. So that's what we've tried to provide for within that forecourt area.
Sorry, can I come back? Yes, we're trying to reduce car usage and all that, but how do people how will people get to it? Not everyone who needs to use it will be able to use public transport. And that's why I'm referring you to what really is happening in Cambridge North Station. You need to look at that. You really do. Because yes, you are sitting there and you're planning this, but it's how it's going to be used and by whom it's going to be used. That's important. Whatever the restrictions you have in terms of space, make it work for the users, not the other way around.
Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood.
Well, interestingly, it's similar to my question. I just put down footfall, origin and destination of users, and I appreciate this is quite a tight site. So it's what you know about the current need and how you can make this sustainable in terms of future need and other residential sites being built. It is a bit different from Cambridge North because we've already got the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, although I suppose the equivalent is the Science Park. But yeah, it's a source of your numbers and how much flexibility you have to project forward to the future. Thanks. So it meets people's needs.
So I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I know obviously during the TWA process and the public inquiry, these aspects were discussed at quite some length. If any of my colleagues can come in here, if not, we might have to come back to you on this with some further information.
Hi Elliot, I can probably talk to it a bit. So during the application for the Transport Works Act order, we did do a full transport assessment for the station, and that took different development timeframes. I think we took it up to 2043, and that looked at taking on board the phase 3 development of the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, plus other southern fringe developments. So the user numbers have sort of been calculated. We've worked with the county and the local authority on producing that document, and that sort of has led to the design development for the station and the placement of the station. And it's designed as a destination station rather than a point where people are coming to then take trains to other points. So we're taking the biomedical campus as the destination and the hospitals there. But we can come back with further details if required.
I think they would be welcomed.
I did have a second question, which was really about designing for security of bikes. It's been raised already, though. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't know whether you can actually maybe go to those slides around the cycle facilities.
Yes.
And if you're happy just to kind of talk through our current plan. I know obviously we're developing it with officers at the moment.
So on the east, this is an image of the east, and in red. So if I just pick this up, so you have the station building effectively to the left, and actually we've got some spaces for staff, area for staff, and then this is the cycle parking area, which is all covered. This area here has sizes for non-standard cycles with floor anchors and some shorter Sheffields for a wider range of cycles. Along the embankment side, so this is the Garda Busway embankment along just the north side of the image. These are all double stackers, and we need that purely for the amount of bikes we're trying to contain in this area. Here we have some standard Sheffield stands, and then in this area here we've got an enclosure which is transparent, so you can see people in, with a secondary means of escape once you're in there. We've discussed these layouts with BTP and also taken sizes for the spacing from the Cambridgeshire cycle stakeholders, and also the accessibility groups and advice from that. For the west, it's very much a similar picture. So we've got on the left side of the screen the station building, which is a transparent enclosure, so staff can see through this. We've got more non-standard size cycles stands there. We've got standard Sheffield size stands here, and then along the rear are again the double stackers. And then this is the secure cycle storage again, and that has a mixture of types in there. And then the aim of that is to keep visibility all the time. The secure storage is at the end to keep that transparent visibility across. The actual mechanism for entering that storage, whether that's a key card or a card code or something like that, that all has to be developed and agreed. Is that okay?
Thank you. So can I ask Councillor Florbut for her question, please?
Thank you. It's basically just a few points on safety and security I would like to make to possibly make you just think about those things because they are very important. I actually work in the biomedical campus, and it is really, really scary to cycle and to go to work, to go and to come sometimes because there is no enough lighting. It's problematic. We have to arrange many times to go and to come with work colleagues because it's not possible to do it by yourself at a certain time, especially after 6 p.m. So I would urge you to really think about improving the lighting over there, because at the moment it's just awful and very, very scary. And in this sense, I would also suggest, I don't know if it's possible, if it's your responsibility, but to include some safety points where if you are in trouble, you can contact the police and you don't feel lonely. I'm saying this because when you are in a station, there are no people there. Many people, they work at night time or they finish late, and you have a problem. And it's just for safety. It's so reassuring if you know that there is a safety point where you can contact the police, or if you have any problems. I mean, we rely a lot on mobile phones, but sometimes mobile phones, they don't work for many reasons. And if we are going to be doing this, I think we have to think about those things that are important. And then there is another point I like to raise, and is I think it has been already said, but just to emphasize, is the size of the width of the footways. At the moment, we have huge problems. I mean, going to work in the bus guide is impossible many times because some people, we share these footpaths, and some people are going, some people are coming with buggies, with large bicycles, other people, they walking, and it's just not possible. And at night time, it's very dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. Many people, they have fallen. So I don't know if you could basically explain again how you're going to manage this issue that we have at the moment, because we will continue having this if it's not improved. And you have to think that it's
okay,
as you
Councillor
said,
Florbut, I think you've made
sorry.
your point. Thank you. We haven't got all day. We've heard the substance of what you had to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Elliot, would you like me to pick this up?
Yeah,
briefly?
if you can do, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. The concerns noted. the station accesses are from the east are lit to modern standards. We have to consider the pollution, especially in the park. So the park will have lower lighting, but also meet current standards. And at the station entrances will be help points for people, and also throughout the station are help points for contacting people if there are any concerns. And of course, we can only provide these points within the station territory. Thank you.
Councillor Stoper, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to amplify on one or two of the points that other councillors have raised. But first of all, really a request, because new station designs don't come along very often. And so this is not quite a unique opportunity, but an intriguing opportunity for us to become involved in, well, the shape of a new station. Of course, there's Waterbeach Newtown station coming up. So we're very interested in, perhaps on a future occasion, to look again, well, to look and to understand the philosophy of the station design. What does it borrow from? How is it trend-setting? How is it an exemplar in the way, you know, a modern station is presented to the public? So that was just a request to be noted. Now, in regard to the various things that have been raised, the almost anecdotes of how stations get used, I wonder if there's a place in this process for, I think, what software people call use cases. So is a collection of maybe 10 or 15 cases of people using the station. Do they make that transition off the train, onto the train, late at night, early in the morning, and so on? Do they make that progress easily by virtue of the way the station is designed, by its sight lines, by its waiting areas, and so on? Do I feel safe? Do I feel under threat? Is there somewhere that's well lit at night if I miss the 11:05 and I have to wait till 11:45 in the evening to catch a train? Is there a safe place to stand and I can feel confident? Things like that, and we can bring those more general fears down to some very specific use cases. And then just one or two minor points. You know, Cambridge North suffers from lift failure, and lifts are very important. So we'd like high integrity solutions to, to people moving, in particular lifts. And then, I'd just like to echo that point. This station may well grow. There are other railway developments that are blowing in the wind, which could stretch its capacity and introduce new types of passenger. So, we'd just like to be reassured that there is that flexibility. I think that comment's been made, but I'd just like to underline that requirement. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to respond to the question about use cases?
Yes, I can probably do that. Is that right, Elliot?
Yeah, I was hoping you'd stand up there.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's a very, very good good comment, and it's something we look at when there's specific design guidance, and Network Rail has really advanced the design guidance for stations, and looking at not just the users but understanding who the stakeholders are. And this is something that we will be presenting to the Cambridgeshire Quality panel later this month. Thank you.
So, Councillor Fane has been waiting very patiently.
Thank you, Chair. An earlier slide showed the vehicular access routes, red lines. I just want to ask, it is quite conceivable, I guess, that there would be a certain amount of demand for the station to be used both from Trumpington and Great Shelford to the west, people either dropping off people using the kiss and ride sites, I like that term, or indeed queuing to collect people. But of course that would depend on using the Addenbrooks Road, which is ANPR controlled for access to the hospital, basically. And I wonder what the status of Addenbrooks Road will be for that purpose. Will the use of the kiss and ride sites be prevented from the west and only accessible from the east?
I think I can answer that one. So we have been in discussion with the campus management company and with the local police authority who actually monitor the ANPR system. And what we're looking to do is add an additional camera onto the entrance, the eastern entrance into the station forecourt, so that any vehicle that has triggered the ANPR coming onto the campus from Adam Brooks Road would then be picked up going into the station forecourt, and therefore the system would capture that they've actually gone to the station, and then they're trying to do the rat run through from Francis Crick Avenue, Robinson Way and onto Long Road. So it needs a little bit more technical discussions on how that's going to work, but we're aware of the situation and we think we can manage it through the addition of some further ANPR cameras.
Satisfied?
That's very helpful. Yes, I am. Thank you. Perhaps I could just take the opportunity to ask a brief second question, which is, if I understood correctly, the platform on the west side, which I assume will be northbound, is covered, but the platform on the east side, presumably southbound, would not be covered. Had I understood the plans correctly on that?
Sorry. Not quite. Both platform, well, all platforms are covered about 50% roughly, and we test that with some modelling to do with which is relationship to dwell times on a rainy day. But basically, all platforms have coverage. Thank you.
Councillor Bradman.
Thank you, Chair. That very last point, I know you said you'd shortened the canopy, and I just wanted you to contemplate the thought of waiting for a train without a canopy on a rainy day, and hope that you might do the maximum amount of canopy that you could. I sit on the Fen Line station users group, and I know this is something they're often concerned about. So I'm sorry to hear about the shortening of the canopy. The second thing I wanted to ask was about, and it sort of echoes a bit what Councillor Gorstrop Wood said, but it's about the anticipated future passenger numbers. So bear in mind, this is a site that's going to have a children's hospital on it. It's got Addenbrooke's, it's got the Rosie, it's got the Papworth Heart and Lung Hospital on it. Now, my concern is, are you confident that your arrangements are going to cater for all of those anticipated passengers by whatever means they might come? And in particular, I would very much like you to demonstrate the transport planning for those who might arrive from a distant place by train and then need to get to one of those hospitals. Because it seems to me the actual buses, because some people will need to use a bus to get to Addenbrooke's from this site. It's not walking distance for many people. So I just wanted, when it comes to the application, it would be really good if you could talk about, for example, the walk distance from the railway to the bus stop, frequency of buses, and a circulation system of buses so that people can get from the railway station to whichever hospital it is they want to or need to attend. Yes, those are the ones I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Okay, so on the second point, I know Paul explained earlier that obviously the transport statement was submitted as part of the TWAO. So we're probably best off coming back to you with some more detailed information on that, because it's been picked up a couple of points. And like I said earlier, it was discussed at length in regards to the principle of the development back at the TWAO stage. So it might be easy if we prepare a little package for it to send over to you with some further information on that. And then, Jan, I've seen you pop up. If you're right to talk about the reduced canopy size, that'd be great.
Yeah, to touch on both. So it's a bit of a misnomer to say it's reduced, because when we develop options and just try and understand the massing, we start with a big picture of what could this station be. And and then we sort of develop that and understand the passenger numbers and the people who will be, we've done calculations, understanding how many people will be waiting on the platforms, what their desire lines are, the train lengths, and with that analysis, then we can determine more what canopies are needed. And then we project, for instance, as Paul mentioned earlier, so we have standards opening year 2026, say opening of say 1 million passengers, and then we project that upwards to 2043 mentioned, and that increases to 2.4 million passengers. And then we work with that case, and then we also look at that for evacuation. We also look at that for if there's a missed train, and where you might have more passengers waiting on the platform, and then that determines that kind of canopy coverage. Okay, thank you.
You wanted a follow-up question? And
Thank
then
you very much.
Councillor Hawkins and then Councillor Khan, okay. And then I think that will be it.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to, so did I understand you to say that the station has been designed with an anticipated usage of 2.4 million passengers? That's a question maybe you can answer. And you've looked at the capacity of the platforms if there was a missed train. The other thing I just wanted to point out that absolutely essential to have good CCTV on those cycle racks. And also I just wanted to point out that double stacking cycle racks are not easy for people with, they're all right if you've got a nice light racing bike, but they're not good for women. I find them difficult to use, as demonstrated elsewhere with people from the County Council. So the most essential thing is that those bike racks actually that it's possible to lock your bike soundly to them, because sometimes they are preferentially used in a way because it's not easy to lock your bike to them. So, but I would really like to see the transport plan for when this comes to officers, that you've demonstrated how people are going to get from the train to a bus or to the Children's Hospital or Addenbrooks or Papworth, if that's the way they arrive. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hawkins, please.
Thank you for allowing me to come back, Chair. One thing that I think will be applicable to this is West Rail. The current route or the alignment that's been chosen is because Cambridge South will be there. Have this project group considered that in their transport analysis, traffic analysis? Thank you.
And Councillor Khan.
Although you say that it's been designed as a destination station, you will, I presume, not be preventing people buying tickets there and going off to London, and I cannot see how it will not be used extensively by people going to London from people living on the south of Cambridge, not wanting to go into the centre of Cambridge through the traffic jams. What I would be concerned about, with limited, with only kiss and tell parking on the site, is that there will be people using the visitor car park in Addenbrooks to park to go into the station, and the effect that will have on people actually coming to Addenbrooks to visit Addenbrooks. Have you considered that in your modelling?
Councillor Vin, do you just want to make a statement, a comment?
Well, I really just I wanted to make a comment. Okay, it's really backing up what Councillor Khan says. There was reference to a destination station, which I think will come as extremely bad news to the residents of Trumpington, especially with all the cars that will be associated with that. I mean, if there's room for all this car parking, then I recommend a little bit more bicycle parking, so it's a destination station for cyclists. Thank you.
I'm just going to make some final comments. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation and for your answers. I think, as you've probably heard, it would be helpful if you could send through some more considered responses to some of those key questions that were raised. And I'll just go through them. There's one about the land swap and the BNG impacts. This is about the open spaces, and like the gross and net outcome. Clarification of the location of the construction compounds. Although we had a long answer, there was no visual for us to actually understand what was being said. It's come out through very, very strongly the question about cycle security, and I think a full explanation of cycle security would be much appreciated. And I think we probably need to be satisfied on this question of growth. There is going to be another, in addition to all the hospitals that Councillor Bradman referred to, there is potentially a further substantial land allocation for the future expansion of the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. And we just need to ensure that the numbers have taken that fully into account. And then lastly, and I think most importantly, is this forecourt is being asked to do a lot of work. And I think I've heard concerns about its capacity to receive drop-offs, people with disabilities, taxis, the proximity of the bus stops. And I'm bearing in mind here Councillor Bradman's remarks about the fact that a lot of people will be coming to this station will be people who are actually quite ill. I mean, you go to Addenbrooke's when you're ill and your mobility is very limited. I think if you're going to come by public transport, you would need to have a bus service right on the doorstep of so in that forecourt area, I think that's an essential thing to have. We've got the covered cycle places, we've got the footways, and then we also, when we heard from Councillor Fulbert about the personal security as well, I think that's really important. So I think the question of use cases and the usability of this station is quite important to the committee. It's going to be how it's going to work for pedestrians and cyclists and vehicles and buses, and just to be reassured that this is going to work. So thank you very much for the presentation. I'm now going to... so Philip is going to come in.
If I may, I think I would just like to just take the opportunity just to clarify a few points about procedure, because I think we just need to be clear about what applications will be returning to JDCC in due course. Obviously, we've had really thorough presentations today that have touched on quite a wide-ranging number of issues. A lot of these issues, if not all of them, fall under the conditions associated with the permission that technically officers are delegated to determine under their own officer delegated powers. Yeah. Today's briefing was in respect of the station design, which is planning condition 17, the detailed design approval, which we are anticipating will be coming back to JDCC in due course. So there will be obviously the opportunity at that point to further review. But I just wanted to make the point of clarification that a number of the other planning conditions will be determined under officer delegated powers, just in case there was any confusion arising around that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're all clear on that point.
Yes. And I hope that our voicing of our concerns will be taken into account by the officers.
Sorry, absolutely. Should have made that point. A lot of good discussion today, lots of notes being taken, and I'm sure that the developer team have got lots that they've taken away from the feedback today. So thank you.
Not a word wasted, Councillor Bradman. Okay, so please could I remind members that the next Joint Development Control Committee meeting is taking place on the 15th of March. If members are unable to attend this meeting, please could you liaise with your alternates to ensure that the meeting is quorate and can go ahead. I'd also ask members to note the revised dates for the December 23 and February 24 meetings. So the December one is now Tuesday, the 12th of December, and the February meeting is Tuesday, the 13th of February. Thank you. That now concludes the Joint Development Control Committee meeting. There we go.